Hello and welcome to the Creating Connections podcast, where I bring voices and perspectives from different people who are making a difference for children's learning and development. I'm Rachel Stewart, and I'm passionate about connecting with people to share experiences and learn from each other how we can best support children to thrive. As founder and director of Practically Learning, I specialise in developing the capacity of parents and educators through personal development coaching and professional learning programs to build relational capital and trust to engage in effective partnerships. I'm endlessly curious about what is happening in our world today, especially in our schools, and how we can share good news stories and strategies for what is working and how to improve the lives of children in our world today and for the future. In this series of the podcast, we are exploring successful leaders in education, so you can learn from a diverse range of people what makes a successful leader and how you can take their learnings and apply them to your leadership. Today, I'm introducing you to an accomplished leader who currently works as Principal in Residence for the Victorian Academy of Teaching and Leadership. Greg Lacey began his career as a teacher, then went on to become a leading teacher in the Kunyung, Hampton Park East, Lyndale and Hughesdale areas, working his way into a leadership role as Assistant Principal at Courtney Gardens Primary School, then becoming Acting Regional Network Leader for the Northern Peninsula. And his first principalship was at Tyab Primary School, then Lyndhurst Primary School, which he will return to in 2024 after his secondment this year. Greg has also been a board member of the Victorian Principals Association and Australian Principals Federation and Australian Government Primary Principals Association. Greg is a Williamson Fellow and for 2 years served on the council of the Leadership Victoria Alumni Association. He is currently on and has served on the Menzies board since 2008 and continues in the capacity of Vice President. Greg Lacey and I will share in conversation about his varied career as a leader in education, where you'll learn more about his background and how he became a leader, his many commitments on boards and passion for supporting children to thrive, what his visions are for the future of education and some of the initiatives he's been involved with this year to contribute to the improvement and preparation of teachers and assistant principals to move into leadership roles. So I'd like you to welcome Greg to our conversation. All right, well, we may as well get started. I've actually already done an introduction because I had a look at your bio and it's quite extensive, of course, over the, I guess, the length of your career. And so I'd just like to welcome you here to my podcast, Creating Connections. And I just want to start by asking you, I suppose, where you started and what made you decide to undertake teaching as a career, because our audience, there might be some teachers listening or some potential future teachers listening. So it'd be nice to hear what motivated you to choose it as a career and why you think it is a great option for a career path.
Yeah, okay. So I guess early on, I went through the whole, I want to be an architect, I want to be a pilot, all the things. But I was very heavily in the scouting, involved in the scouting organisation. So I had been involved with young people for quite some time, and I was also heavily involved in junior sport, coaching junior sport in softball and football and various other sports. And I just always enjoyed working with kids. And it kind of led me into an opportunity to go to university and study how to turn that into a career. So, I went to what used to be Burwood Teachers College, is now Deakin University in Burwood, and did my 3-year diploma there. Thoroughly enjoyed that. And then went on to do my bachelor degree in postgraduate and then a postgraduate diploma in computer education, which was an interest of mine as well that grew on me afterwards. But I guess it just grew out of years of working with kids and working alongside kids and watching their development and wanting to turn that into a career.
Yeah. And at the time, were you encouraged to go into teaching? Because I guess there's a lot of male teachers out there, but probably not as many as there used to be. So I suppose back when you started, there might have been more male teachers who were choosing that as a profession.
I think the ratio at the time was probably about 1 to 4 when I went through university. About 1 in 4 of us were male. That's a much greater ratio than you would find now, I think.
Yeah.
It's not that I didn't have a background in education. I didn't have family who were teachers, which is often why people go into teaching. Interestingly, I've seen some research since that if you're the first member of your family line to do a degree, if you're male or female, you're very likely to go into teaching, most likely to go into teaching or nursing, to be is the research. They're the two degrees where, as a family line, where tertiary education has not been something that's continued through the family line and you're the first person, you're very likely to go into teaching and nursing. And I guess that's because even from a background that's not traditionally around tertiary education, it's a fairly easy place to start tertiary education without having, if you're a lawyer and you've often got a legal family, that kind of, if you don't grow up in that environment, then teaching's a comfortable one to move into from a middle class background.
Yeah, and family has a lot to do with your career paths in many ways. I do remember when I was, I think, in year 9 at school, we were advised as females to choose nursing or teaching as a career path.
Yeah.
So it's almost, it was almost as if they were doing a bit of a recruitment drive back then, to get more people into teaching. And I suppose now that we're facing a lot of teacher shortages and challenges around keeping teachers in the profession, what do you think would encourage young people to actually move into teaching as a career path? And your career has taken you across many different paths. And I suppose as a young child or as a young person, we think our lives are going to be linear, whereas we know that they move in all different directions and all these different opportunities come up along the way. So perhaps if you could share your journey of how that happened for you and why you think it's a really amazing profession to take on.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of really key points for it that have kept me in the profession. One of them is that as a teacher, you're able to actually indulge your personal interest in your job, and teaching gives you an opportunity to even develop new personal interests. So I've been a computer education teacher, I've done audio visuals, I've been an art teacher, I've been a music teacher. I've always had an interest in music, I've always had an interest in art and drawing. I've been, a generalist primary classroom teacher, but to be able to bring those personal interests and bring that passion for those interests to kids is something that really gives me a great deal of joy. But once you're in it, you've just, I don't know, you just fall in love with the occupation. And because every day you get to watch kids develop and grow and see the difference they make in their lives. And I've got 100 stories, 1,000 stories that sit behind all that of kids that I feel like I've had a positive influence over and changed their life trajectory to a much more positive line. And I just feel like we're in a bit of a spiral at the moment where we talk about the difficulties in teaching, the more that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, that the more I hear about the occupation being a difficult one, the more people think it's a difficult one. But we should be just talking about the joy that we get from this job more and less about the difficulties. It's a tough job, and you can't do it in 38 hours a week. We know that. And there are difficulties in it, and there are difficult kids, and there are increasingly difficult kids in schools with all sorts of issues going on, particularly post-COVID. But at the end of that all is just a joy in watching kids develop and watching them grow, and even their families. You get so involved with their families and the parents. When I was principal at Tyre Primary School, it's a smaller community. Great-grandparents went to the same school, that kind of sort of semi-rural, and you get so involved with the community and the family, and it's not something you get to do in jobs all over the place. Yeah. I remember I had a colleague who I did a leadership course with, and she was a high-level accountant with a large accountancy firm, and she was moving to another job over in Paris with an apartment that faced the Eiffel Tower, and what a great opportunity she had. And at the time I was leaving my school tie-up, I was leaving as principal to take on the new school at Lyndhurst. And I spoke to her about the final assembly, where the kids made me a throne in black and red because I'm an Essendon supporter, and they made a great big long scarf, like meters and meters long, with all their well wishes on the scarf. And what an emotional time it was. And she said to me, after many years at my company, I'll leave next week and no one will notice. And like, you don't go into the job for that, but that's
Yeah.
that's what you get from the job that just keeps you in it and keeps you working so hard
And
it's a really difficult job.
and that's the spirit and joy that kids bring, isn't it, to your life? And maybe, do you have a story that really stands out to you that really brought you joy in terms of watching a child or a family develop, and how that actually impacted you as a person? Because it is like the story you just shared then of the kids doing that for you, that's a very emotional thing that I suppose in some ways you can't help but show your vulnerability in those times when kids do some special things for you or say things that just really touch your heart.
Well, I was a mess, to be honest, that day. I'm the biggest sook. Staff jokingly run a bit of a book at how long into my graduation speech I'm going to tear up and get emotional about the kids leaving.
Yeah.
I've got one. Look, it's a longer story, but the short story is that I had a girl at a school in my grade 5-6 class who came down from the country, and she had serious learning difficulties. The most delightful kid, and well liked by all the other kids, and had this great intuition about how other kids were feeling, and would come to me and say, "Look, Mr. Lacey, I just think you need to have a chat to Cheryl and Susan because I reckon they're having some friendship problems." And she would. So marvelous, and an amazing, beautiful country family who came down to the city to live. We had a great struggle with her transition into secondary college, and that was a really frustrating process that I was able to kind of help her through and support her through. But during her middle teen years, she got cancer, and I kind of kept in her family was living quite close to a good friend of mine, and so I kept in contact with the family and kind of tracked her journey through that. And she had cancer and then got rid of it and then came back and had a really troubled teenage time. But the last I heard of her was she was over her cancer, she was through it, and she had got a job as a swimming teacher, and she was doing well in that. And I didn't hear much about her until out of the blue I got an invite to her 21st birthday. And I'm going to get a bit emotional about this because at that 21st birthday, I began to realize that this was her last birthday. The cancer was back and it wasn't going to go away. And so I just stood at the back. I'm just her grade 5-6 teacher. And partway through her speech, she said, "I want to thank Mr. Lacey for being here. He was the only teacher who really cared for me." And I went, oh my God. And I tell that teacher to my young teachers all the time, just you never know what impact you're having, and you may never know. And I had the privilege of actually knowing the impact I'd had through that story. And we don't often see that, particularly as primary teachers, because they go off after grade 6 and we never see them again. I think it's just a great example of every moment that you're in, and I ask my teachers every moment to think about the impact they're having on their children. I've got a great thing on my wall about the ability to humanize or dehumanize at any point in the day. And this idea that every day you just need to turn up and be the best you can be for those kids, regardless of what's going on in your private life, to be honest.
Yeah.
And
how do you manage that yourself in terms of, because it is highly emotional, because we're dealing with humans, and you being human yourself, you need to have the skills to be able to manage, even hearing the news that one of your students has cancer and being able to process that and, manage those emotions that come up, and how you support the family, and how do you prepare yourself, or what sort of self-development work do you do on yourself to be able to manage those situations and those, I guess, things in life that come up?
I think at heart I'm a fairly calm person, and whilst I'm emotional, I'm quite rational. I've had the ability to be able to think things through and not. It's this difference between understanding how someone else is feeling and taking it on yourself. And I think that's the key. You need to be able to understand and empathise with the other person and what they're going through, but not take that that problem, that issue they're going through on yourself. That you can only do what you can do, and to some degree, it's accepting that life's not great sometimes, and stuff happens that you just can't do anything about, and being able to think about, well, I can only do what I can do about the things I can actually do something about. If I can't do anything, I have a thing on my wall that says, if I can do something about it, then why worry? And if I can't do anything about it, no need to worry.
Yeah. Worry just wastes energy that you need to actually work through a solution.
Yep. I've said 1,000 times, nothing's ever been fixed by someone worrying about it.
Yeah.
And I think when it's not being hard about it, it's just being very practical about what you can do and what you can't do. But also having boundaries in terms of what your place is as a teacher. I'm not the psychologist. I'm not the parent. I'm not the doctor. I'm a teacher. I'm a significant adult in their life, but I also have to maintain some boundaries around what I can and can't do with those people, and what that relationship is. I often talk about a teacher-student relationship being very different from any other relationship. It is about teaching and learning, and alongside that comes a responsibility for their well-being. But you also have to understand the extent to which you can influence that, and what you can do and what you can't do, and being able to work that out for yourself and fit yourself into that space.
Yeah, and you can't change what is happening for that child at home, and they often bring that with them to school most of the time. And I suppose in leading teachers the way that you have, how do you support them to learn those skills in terms of their own self-development and their own ways of dealing with emotions that do come up when they do hear stories, or when a child presents to them in a way that sort of triggers them, the teachers?
We often talk to staff about, we use the term "who's your class," because it makes sense for them. Like they know their children, they know the class, they know what the responsibilities are. If they step up into a leadership role, their class changes. They have a new class now. It's the teachers in their team. And when you step up as a principal, who's your class? Well, the teachers in my school are my class. So be able to deal with them in that point. I'm here for their development. I'm here for their progress. I am here for their well-being, but I'm not here to solve everything in their life.
Yeah.
So I think being vulnerable yourself allows them to be vulnerable, but also being able to have those rational conversations around what you can do something about and what you can't do anything about. And I've quite often said to people, even get parents come in, particularly when I worked in disadvantaged areas in Cranbourne and so on, in schools like that. Parents come in, they kind of know you can't do anything about what their problems are, but they just want someone to listen for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And so you do, and they go away and they feel a bit better for it. And nothing's really changed for them, but at least someone's listened to them.
Yeah.
So, if you take that kind of approach, that, you treat people in the way that you would treat kids in your class. I'm an educator with a role to play, but I'm not the solution to all their problems. And being open, saying, you understand I can't do anything about this. And they go, yeah, I know that, but I'm here to listen.
Yeah.
And if that's enough, then that's all I can do for you.
Yeah. So in terms of people who influenced you as a leader, you've mentioned you've got quotes and I suppose affirmations that you draw on just to keep yourself in check and on track.
Yeah.
Who are some of your role models that you look up to, either in education or outside of education, that have influenced your leadership?
Early on in leadership, I had a principal at a school in a fairly disadvantaged area in southeastern Melbourne. And I was only at that school for 3 years, and he was only my principal for about 18 months before he retired. But he had a profound influence on the way I went about my leadership. And it was because he had this great way of shielding, but holding high expectations. If you were getting difficult time from parents who would be there to be the buffer to protect you from that and I was only a young teacher at the time. But then he would call you into the office and have a conversation about, okay, well, this is what's happened and what led to that and what would you do differently next time? How could you have avoided the situation that we got ourselves into here? So had this great way of, we knew he was there and he had our back, but we also knew that if we'd stuffed up, he was going to tell us about it and make sure we didn't do it again. So that balance, and it made a lot of sense to me later on in my leadership when I started to listen to people like Steve Munby from the UK, Tracy Ezard. There's a few of them who talk about head and heart leadership and balancing the head and the heart. Steve Munby calls it power and love. Tracy Ezard calls it ferocious warmth. Sonia Sharp calls it head and heart. You know, it's the same concept of being able to bring both sides of yourself, not separately, not I'm going to use my heart in this situation, I'm going to use my head in this situation, but I'm going to draw from both of those sides throughout this process or this coaching conversation or this problem that I'm trying to deal with. I'm going to draw from my head side and draw from my heart side to bring both of those to the solution that we might need to get to or the conversation that I'm having. And I think coaching training helped me a lot in that as well. I'm an accredited growth coach, so that helps me in the kind of language I use with people and the way I can support them through those issues. But those people who talk about that complexity of the head and the heart in leadership are the ones that have really influenced me later on. And it came from Eddie from many years ago, who demonstrated that clearly to me as a young teacher, the way he went about that.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the gift that we have as humans, is that we do have a head and a heart, and it's how we respond to different situations, drawing on both of those. But it takes a certain sense of self-awareness to be able to listen to your intuition to know how to respond. And you mentioned that you're a coach and how that's helped to clarify, I suppose, the language that you use and the questions that you ask people. So how would you recommend that leaders should do some coaching training to be able to understand how to respond to different personalities and different situations?
I think everyone should do it, to be honest. I think
I do too.
I just had 5 days with Jim Knight from the United States, 5 days of professional learning with him, and he's just this incredibly humble but amazingly knowledgeable person about that. And his whole thing is about better conversations lead to better relationships, and it's not just at work, and it's not better conversations lead to better relationships, and better relationships lead to a better world. That's kind of his mantra, and I actually honestly believe that. You know, I had a young teacher who had done something, look, with the best of intentions. She left a class unsupervised to go and support another teacher. So left a group of kids unsupervised. So we had a discussion with her, and I had a coaching conversation with her. I didn't tell her it was a coaching conversation until it turned out to be. And afterwards, she said, "Did I just get told off?" And I said, "Do you feel like you got told off?" She said, "No, not really." So I said, "But will you do it differently next time?" And she said, "Yeah, I will." I said, "Okay, well, that's the conversation. You weren't told off at all, but you've learned from it, and let's move on from there." So, and I think that's when you actually challenge, when people come up with their own solutions, and that's what coaching for me is all about. I'm not here to tell you what you need to do. I'm here to help you think through this so that the solution is not only created by you, but owned by you, and you're much more likely to follow through on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Take ownership and responsibility.
I do get the statement every now and then from my wife to say, "Don't use your coaching voice with me."
Yeah, I get that from my kids.
Yeah.
Stop trying to coach me, Mum. You mentioned about relationships, and clearly schools are all about relationships.
Mm-hmm.
How important is it to foster a culture of building, I suppose, a relational approach to not only students but also families, and how have you gone about that in your school communities?
Yeah, I've had two great opportunities being principal at two separate schools. One was obviously walking into an established school, so my first school, Tyre Primary School, opened in 1895 from a bunch of orchardists who had a plot of land in a building and wrote a letter to the Department of Education saying, we've got 12 kids in a building, can you send us a teacher, please? So that's how that started. And an old orchard family whose great-grandparents went to the same school as the kids, and, you know, that kind of... So you walk into this really established culture, and it's a different job to be able to slightly shift that culture in a way that you want it to be than it is at the new school. When I opened Lyndhurst, I had the blessing of having no culture. So no one said that's not how we do it here, because I got to actually begin that right from the very first seed of the school to start that culture. And they're both different challenges, but in lots of ways very similar. For me, a lot of what I do is about modeling the culture I want, and using that every day. Someone said to me once that great leaders move the organisation forward with everything they say and do. It's always about moving the organisation forward. You don't do anything that takes the organisation backwards. So every little interaction, you're thinking, and becomes more romantic than it does thinking. But at first, you think through what's the best way to take the organisation forward. If I'm just in a conversation in the corridor, whatever it is this going to take the organisation forward? And so keeping that in mind all the time. What's going to take the organisation forwards is having strong, positive relationships that are built around not only good relationships, but high expectations. We talk about high expectations at our school a lot. We talk about it in 3 ways. We talk about parents having high expectations of the kids, and teachers having high expectations of the kids. We all talk about that one. But I also talk about teachers having high expectations of each other. If you're going to be here and you're going to be in this team, there are things expected of you as a teacher. And we expect you to meet those standards. We expect you to interact in a particular type of way. We expect you to work in a certain kind of way. We expect you to treat the kids in a certain kind of way. But then I also talk about the kids having high expectations of each other. So I, as a child at this school, have a right to expect a certain level of behaviour from my friends. And if I don't get that, I have a right to be firm about it and say, I'm not going to accept that. That's not good enough. That's not what we do here. And if you've got a, what's his name from Heart on Your Sleeve, Mitch Wallace, he said, values become culture when it's what people do when the boss leaves.
Yeah.
And I guess in terms of culture, that's what you want. I don't have to be there to police the culture. The culture is what it is, because when I walk away, nothing changes. And so, you know, that's kind of what's driven me a lot. The advantage of starting a new school, though, is that I guess you've got some choice around how you actually start a new school, and you can either start on the processes and the policies, or you can start on the culture.
Yeah.
You can't do everything all at once. And my decision at Lyndhurst was to start on the culture, because I feel like, what do they say? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. If you can have all the strategy you like, but if you haven't got the right culture, no strategy is going to work. So my aim was to build the right culture and get the right people. We talk about our employment policy being get great people and turn them into great teachers. Obviously, they need some basic skill as teachers, but you can teach them technique. You can teach them teaching strategies. You can't teach people how to be a good person if they're not.
Yeah. So you choose good people to work with. That's your strategy, I suppose, to develop that culture. Yeah,
and that's the key that you get in a new school that you don't get in an established school. In an established school, you get what you get and you don't get upset. In a new school, you actually get to decide from the beginning what sort of people you want in your school. And it's not like you want a bunch of clones. It's not like you want people just like you. Certainly as a leadership team, I think a lot of principals make the mistake of employing more of themselves. Well, my school doesn't need more of me. We need more of a variety of people, but they still need to have the same underpinning values.
Yeah. Yeah. And so with the teaching staff, when you move into a school that's already established, how do you work through cultural change with them in terms of shifting their mindset towards a more relational approach to teaching and learning?
Yeah, I think a lot of the work is around helping people understand the why. You're not going to move anything if people don't know why.
Yeah.
I've been doing a course this year with middle leaders, so young emerging leaders just stepping into leadership, and they often complain about, oh, that old teacher who won't take any new ideas on. And when I turn their head around and say, well, maybe that teacher actually has a right after 35 years in the occupation to ask some questions and challenge you to tell me why I should be changing the practice in my classroom. So they're not just being a blocker, they're actually being a professional saying, I'm prepared to change, but I think you need to give me a really good reason to put the effort in. And this is kind of part of the work of Jim Knight when he talks about setting goals that are emotionally compelling. Is it worth the effort? I'll put the effort in if I feel like I'm going to get some value out of it. But right at the moment, things are working pretty well in my classroom. So I need to be convinced that it's worth the effort.
Yeah. And
so
that's where you need to be in touch with your staff too, in terms of, you could have some great ideas of how you want to shift things or change things, but if things are already working for some teachers, why would you go and disrupt that and cause stress and all of those things without actually consulting with them about the why?
Yeah. I guess the other thing we do is that we have this mantra of we never arrive. And what that means is we don't have to talk about change management as a thing, because change is the work. Improvement is the work. So it's not something we suddenly go, oh, by the way, we need to change everything. We're constantly reviewing, assessing, shifting, changing, nuancing. That's just the work we do. Every PLC meeting at our school is about teachers sitting down, looking at their results, looking at their practice, going, how can we do this better? So it's not like we have to have a big change management agenda or some theory of change management. It's just the work that we do every day. Jim Knight says, if you want to be part of that group called professionals, then continuous improvement is not an option.
Yeah.
And when you put that into people's mind, this idea of continuous improvement is just the work we do.
As part of your growth as a professional and as a person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I think that, there's a lot of focus on cultural change and the need to change constantly. But the way you just described it is more, well, it's not actually changing, it's just improving. And with, some tweaks here and there, and it might just lead to other things and other ways to do, or other ideas that come up for people. And I suppose the strength of a team really comes back to their ability to be able to contribute to the improvement. And in a lot of ways, I think you touched earlier on being creative as teachers as well, and being able to tap into your strengths as a person and your interests. Can you share a little bit more about why it's so important as a teacher and as a leader to be creative and to be willing to go outside the box and try new things and be innovative?
That's a good one, because innovation can sometimes be a bit of a dirty word. It can just be change for change's sake, and so you do need to be careful of that. In our leadership excellence framework at the academy where I'm working now, at the Victorian Academy, one of the domains is leading improvement, innovation and change. And so Viviane Robertson, who's the New Zealand researcher who's worked on that framework for us, is now of the mind, I think, and I don't want to put words into her mouth, but I think she would just stop at improvement and not worry about the innovation and change. It is just about leading improvement. And so one of the challenges for me in establishing the new school is I went in there with, I actually stole the assistant principal from my previous school as well, so she came with me, as well as the business manager, to be honest. But anyway, that's a whole other story. And we were very like-minded about what we wanted the school to be. And one of the things, for example, was we wanted play-based learning from prep to 2. We had done the research, we had trialled it at Tyre Primary School, and so we wanted to take that to Lyndhurst and start from scratch with really good quality academically rigorous play-based learning in Prep to 2. But when you go in with a solid idea about that, you still need to stay open to learning. You still need to open to the fact that, well, this is the idea we've got at the moment, but we need to be constantly monitoring to say, is this working?
Yeah.
So blending a little bit of assuredness about what I want, but still having ears open for the different ideas, the interesting nuances, the small changes that people make to it, the way they adjust it in their classroom. So we talk a lot about in our school about the floor and the ceiling. So the floor is where we want everyone to be. It's the minimum standard for every classroom in our school, but you don't want a standard so rigorous that you stop people reaching the ceiling. So you want some basic standards, you want some understanding about what it is we do here at a basic level, but you also want the freedom to be able to, as you said, experiment and innovate and trial and take their teaching to a whole other level. So it's not about mediocrity, it is about championing people who want to take their teaching to another level and really try something innovative, along with the monitoring that goes along with that. It's not just any idea that we jump in, I just really like to try this because I saw it once.
Yeah.
It's based in research, it's evidence informed, and we've got some measures we can put in place to see whether it's working or not.
Yeah. Right. Now, I just wanted to ask you a little bit more about your current work and your leadership of, I suppose, new emerging leaders in education. And is it called the Inspire program that you've been working through this year, and how that is going to impact new leaders coming through, assistant principals and other leaders who are aspirational? And how important that training is going to be for their development and moving into leadership positions.
Sure. So I'm currently working in the Victorian Academy of Teaching and Leadership. So the academy was stood up about nearly 2 years ago now. It's a separate statutory authority under the guidance of the Department of Education. And I've been employed there this year as what they refer to as a principal in residence. So there are currently 6 principals in residence at the academy who all work to bring current practice and current educational thought to the development and the delivery of programs. And we deliver programs in 2 separate divisions. One's around Teaching Excellence Division, who has works with teachers, making young teachers into outstanding teachers in the Teaching Excellence. And I work in the Leadership Excellence Division, so from very, very emerging leaders who are just starting to dip their toes in the water of leadership through to principals and experienced system leaders as well. But my focus has been around middle leaders. And it comes out of my work at Lyndhurst as a growing greenfield school where you just have to grow leadership from within. You know, when your school grows over a 5-year period from 150 to 300 to 450, 520 to 680, and 700 and 900 and beyond, leadership is something you just need all the time. So you need to grow people from within. And so I guess that's why they asked me to move into the middle leaders area, because of my experience doing that and some success in doing that. But my time in the academy, particularly in delivering the programs and actually working with young leaders, it's just been so reaffirming for me about the future of education. You know, we hear so much about millennials and their peccadillos and their ways of going about, and you know, how different they are. You know, they're not much different from when I was a young teacher and just exploring my first leadership. These are dedicated young people who just are there to do the right thing for kids and can see leadership as an opportunity to influence more children than just the kids in my class. And so they may be a slightly different generation, but you know, the way they talk about their job and the way they talk about their role is just like me when I was a young teacher in my first leadership role, just wanting to bring a much more positive influence to a far greater number of kids than I can just as a classroom teacher with the 25 or 30 kids I have in front of me.
Yeah, and every generation is slightly different, but we sometimes forget what we were like, you know, when we were younger as well. And it's not a bad thing to have different ways of doing things or different ideas that are coming through. And but if they have that dedication and the heart to be in the role, then it's fantastic that there's a program that can support them to improve in, moving into leadership. And it's actually heartwarming to hear that. Yeah. And I've met quite a few middle leaders myself, and their dedication is outstanding. And I don't think that people realize, how hard they work, and how they really are passionate about what they do, and are willing to, go to those extra lengths to be able to improve themselves, to be better leaders for other teachers coming through as well.
And I think they're much more worldly and knowledgeable than I was when I was their age.
Very, yeah.
I think they grow up very world aware.
Yep.
Which I wasn't as a young boy coming out of Baronia. So I think they bring that as well. And they also bring a different focus to the work, and much more around wanting to know the why. They want purpose in their work. They really want purpose in their work. I think we just, as young teachers, I think we did the work knowing that there was a purpose, but it wasn't necessarily an internal driver for us, if that makes sense. But I think for these young people, purpose is really important in their life, and really important in the job that they do and the work that they do. And if they feel like they're working in leadership without much purpose or without much direction, that's when they start to drift away. If they feel like they're working in teaching and they don't feel like they're fulfilling their purpose, and understanding what their purpose is, then that's also why they drift away. So that's been a really important part of it as well. One of the great things about the Inspire program is it's actually a trainer-trainer style program. So my job is to run a program that trains principals to become facilitators of the Inspire program. And then they go out to their local areas, and then they run the program with their local leaders. Yeah. So across Victoria, we ran about 17 intakes this year of that program, across every corner of Victoria, with local principals working with local young leaders on this Inspire program, which is a really broad influence across Victoria, which I'm really proud of. And it works really well. It's a great connection for those principals and those young leaders to get together and spend time together. Yeah, I think one of the things you can give to your young leaders as a principal that's really important is your time to sit down and talk through leadership decisions and talk through leadership processes and use leadership language. And you don't often get that time in the busyness of a school. But if you take them out of the school into a program like this and give them time with experienced principal leaders, it's a real blessing for them, and they love it. They all said this year, I ran 2 of the programs, that the content's great, but the conversations have been where the real learning happens.
Yeah, dialogue is so important, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And where relationships are built, and that's the only chance, I guess, you would get as a leader too, to understand your middle leaders and your teachers, to understand what their burning desires are for their purpose, and then to be able to nurture them and mentor them towards fulfilling that purpose.
Yeah. And they're often at quite complicated stages in their life too. In my first year, we had 150 kids. So I think I had about 12 or 13 teachers in that year. Lots of them were first year graduates, because in a new school, it kind of attracts those people. First year graduates and young people are the ones who are excited about being part of starting a new school. But then they grow a little older, and they have their first baby, and then their second baby, and, marriages come along, and, all of those big life moments start to happen in their first 5 to 10 years of their teaching. Yeah. So it's not just a time of growth in their teaching and their leadership. It's an amazing time in their lives as well. And it's just, we often talk about the Lyndhurst family, and there's that kind of, when they come and tell me that they're having a baby, it's almost like they're telling dad. It's a really lovely moment. Way it goes. Yeah.
And that's what relationships are about, isn't it? To embrace the person, not just the teacher or the leader, but the person. And isn't it interesting how we set up our lives in that way, where we're just starting out our careers and all enthusiastic, and then all of a sudden we're dealing with other relationships outside of our profession that we're navigating, that no one really teaches us how to navigate. And then to be able to have the support around you as a teacher and as a leader in the school, to be able to, manage all those milestones and huge events in your life that's a gift.
Yeah. And being able to contribute to their life outside of work as well. You know, one teacher came to me and said, I want to have leave without pay for 3 months. Why is that about? I want to go on MasterChef. Oh, okay. Sure. Well, she finished up. She came back. She went into MasterChef. She finished up on TV and did a great job and didn't win it, but she's really proud of what she did. And
Yeah.
she came back and worked at our school and was almost a different person when she came back. But then later on, she came to me and said, really want to thank you for the opportunity because I'm now going out. I'm becoming a full-time pastry chef. I'm moving to Kyneton and I'm opening a cake shop and a custom cake making business. So, did I keep her in teaching? No, but did I kind of do a little thing to help her with her life ambition? Yeah, that was lovely.
Yeah, she wanted to experience something else in life and you gave her that chance. I'm sure the kids loved it too, watching her on MasterChef.
On MasterChef for sure, yeah. By the time MasterChef came on, she was back teaching, which I think was a bit confusing for the kids. You were on television last night.
Yeah, how did you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, speaking of things that you need outside of your profession, you've been on a number of boards and have contributed in many different ways outside of your role. How do you think that has influenced you as a leader and as a person to be part of those organisations? Perhaps you can expand on them, to be able to see things from different perspectives outside of this going to school every day and for you it's more than a job, obviously, but just to be able to contribute to society in different ways outside of your day-to-day role.
Yeah, I was really fortunate in my first school. When I walked into the school, I walked into what's called a review year. So every 4 years, a government school has a team of reviewers who come in to review everything you do and then make recommendations about what your priorities will be for the next 4 years. So I walked into a review that I hadn't been part of establishing, but was there to receive the results of the review. And the reviewer, Tony Ross, took me aside after he presented to the school council. After the meeting, he said, "I'm coming back tomorrow." And I said, "Oh, is there more to do with the review?" He said, No, we've talked about the school now. I want to come back and talk about you." Which he didn't have to do, but he took it on himself. And I was 41, I think, or 42 at the time, so quite young as a principal. And he said, "I just want you to have a think about what else you're going to do with your life, because if you're still here at TIAB in 25 years when you retire, it's not going to be good for the school. It's not going to be good for you. It's going to be a wasted opportunity. So you need to have a think about what you might do." And so he had been what's referred to as a Williamson Fellow. He had done the Williamson Community Leadership Program, and he recommended that I have a look at it. And so I did have a look at it and finished up applying for it. And it's a program that's run by Leadership Victoria for at the time it was about 35 people a year who went through it. 50% of the people are from business, 25% from the community sector, and 25% from the public sector. So I was the only one person from education in that program in 2007. And so it gave me a whole year to work alongside, we'd have about three events a month, some full day, some just an afternoon, and a couple of country trips as well, to work alongside the 2IC of Tabcorp, or a dancer who'd started his own marketing company, or these are all these amazing people who'd done incredible things.
Yeah.
The person who's in charge of customer relations at ANZ Bank, or extraordinary people. So part of that course is about connecting the business sector with community and public sector, and particularly around businesses who are community focused. And want that connection, so they want to build that into their leaders. And for me, as the only education person on that group, it was amazing how interested those people are in education. Like, the one thing that connects them all at that level is a connection with education. So that was a really great experience for me, and I'm really pleased that I do. I still keep in contact with a number of those people, and one of the people who was in my group in 2007 is now the CEO of Leadership Victoria. So she's kind of running the whole thing, and we had a dinner together the other night, which was great. So that gave me a much broader perspective of the work that we do in education, how wide the impact is, and what the community thinks about education.
Yeah.
But also, I've been network chair at a couple of the networks that I've worked at. We have principal network meetings, and so network chair is a pretty responsible job. And I got involved with the Victorian Principals Association too, because I think once you gain some traction in an occupation, you then want to have some influence. And it's all very nice to have influence at your one school, but similar to when young teachers move into leadership, if I could have influence across a broader level of the community at a state level and at a national level through AGPA, then that was fulfilling for me as well. And that was about Tony's first statement about, if you're still sitting here in 25 years retired, you've wasted some of your time and you wasted some great opportunities. So I always sought those opportunities to get out of my school, but it gave me so much to bring back to my school as well. Those connections made me a much better principal and much better leader by giving that world view, or that statewide view, or that national view, or that business view, if you like, as well.
Yeah, and being open to learning from other people outside of your profession, and what a great opportunity to just learn from different, I suppose, different industries and the way that they approach leadership. And yeah, fantastic. And I suppose in a lot of ways, it's about being in tune with the things that people do say to you, the advice that they give you. And just that one comment got you thinking about, okay, yeah, I think I do have more to contribute, but it's going to actually benefit my school as well. So, yeah, so that's great.
And I kind of have to thank the school council for their foresight, because that year that I did Williamson was a lot of time out of school. But I talked to them about what the program was, and they were just fully supportive of me being involved in that, and constantly wanted me to report back at school council meetings about my learnings and my activities and what was going on. So
yeah,
I was really lucky from that point of view as well. They were really supportive of that.
Yeah, that's great. And so I guess the final big question that I have for you is...
What, the others are not big enough?
No, you answered them very well. It's been a fantastic insight into your journey. And I know that you're, I suppose, close to retiring, but perhaps you've still got a few years left in wanting to contribute to education and seeing what is going to actually happen in the future. And with all the new technology that's coming through and sort of almost disrupting our lives in some ways, and the many different things that happen every day that sort of cause disruption and challenges for everyone. It's great to hear that you've had positive experience in education, and I really want to share these positive stories. I'd love to hear what your, I suppose, optimistic view is of education in the future, and where you see it heading.
Yeah, AI is the big one at the moment, isn't it? And
yeah,
I have to admit to using copy.ai, which is a AI publishing kind of support thing.
It's funny how people almost apologize for using it.
I know. I use it for some of my social media posts. Yeah. Well, in the academy, we have a comms and marketing team, and they constantly want content. And so we go into a program and say, oh, can you send us a social media post about the program that you ran at Bendigo last week? And I get into copy.ai and I just go, can write me a brief 2-paragraph social media post about a principal leadership program in Bendigo. And it just comes up, and you edit it a little bit and send it through and go, this is great.
How good is it?
Yeah. So, I guess because I spent 10 years teaching IT, or at least focusing my teaching around IT, I had a pretty good background early on in my career. I started teaching in a computer classroom in 1980 something, 83, 84. So that's a long time ago. Technology has changed a lot.
Sure has.
Since then. But in essence, it hasn't, because someone said, I read an article early on in the piece when I first started using computers, was any teacher who can be replaced by a computer should be.
Yes, good point.
And I thought, there you go. That's what it is. Teaching, as far as I'm concerned, will always be an interpersonal relationship-based occupation. And we'll have these disruptives, and we'll have things that will come in and out, and we'll have fads and favours and all sorts of things changing the education discourse I get. But at the heart of it, this is a job that's two people, a teacher and a learner, connecting with each other, probably for mutual benefit, but at least for the benefit and development of that young person.
Yeah.
And I don't think any computer is going to change that.
No, I don't believe so either.
So I'm really hopeful for the future of education. My work with young leaders tells me that education is going to be in good hands. They think differently than me, and that's okay. That's good. I like that, because we don't need more of me at 65 or whatever I am. But as long as we keep that core, that we understand that any teacher who can be replaced by a computer should be, and we keep that understanding that this is an interpersonal, person-to-person job, and it may be person to 25 people, but in the end, for each of those children, it's person to person, then it's in good hands, and I'm really optimistic for the future.
Yeah. And that's it, isn't it? It's for the child, through the child's eyes, it's me and my teacher. And that's such an important reason for actually being a teacher in the first place.
Absolutely.
Just to have an impact on that one little person's life, or young person's life, and also that interpersonal relationship that can't be replaced by any technology.
No.
And the ability, like you've shown today, to be vulnerable and to share stories and to help each other grow is something that we still need to continue to nurture in our education system and in our families, with our families as well, and across our teaching staff and school leaders. So I think we're in a really interesting time in education where there's a lot of realizations taking place around that, and knowing that even though we are all going through various challenges in our own lives, we have to support each other. Otherwise, how else are we going to get through these challenges in the first place? So
I think the other long thing that sits alongside it for me is, I don't know how to put this, but the issue around men in education is a really big one that I think is going to challenge us. I feel like there's an unhealthy attitude in society about men in education or men in early childhood, and I think it's such an important thing that we have a diversity of people in education and in particularly early childhood, and that's becoming less and less. It's less attractive as an occupation, it seems, for men, and there's this suspicion around men who want to be nurturing and want to be in teaching and learning and early childhood that I think is really unhealthy. And I understand, some of the community concerns around it, but I just think it's not great for the future of education if it becomes completely feminized in a way.
I think we definitely need.
What the right language is, but
we need more. I think that we need more male influences in children's lives, because a lot of them are from separated families, and some don't see their fathers. And I think that the male way of approaching teachers, in my experience with my children, is quite different to females, and some children really are more engaged in some ways with a male teacher in a lot of circumstances. But I know what you're saying, and I think that is going to, what's needed is a shift in cultural perspectives of men in general, that men are nurturing, and they have a feminine side, just like women have a male side, that needs to be acknowledged as not as a weakness, but as a strength.
It's a strength,
and that is part of being in different professions where, like in health as well as nurses, and where you do need to have that nurturing personality and have empathy and all of those things, which who says men don't have that?
Yeah, or can't have it,
and to shift the mindset of people in general to see that the massive benefits of males in the teaching profession.
Yeah. I guess diversity in general around all of that is really important for kids to be exposed to that diversity. Our school has, for cultural diversity, we have 50 language groups from 45 countries. About 65% of our kids are English as an additional language. That's one type of diversity, but I think there's a whole lot of diversity we could bring into education that's going to help kids in their lives and their development and how they see the world. Yeah,
definitely.
It's been a great occupation for me. If any men are out there listening to it, it's an occupation I've never regretted moving into, and it's brought me great joy for my whole life. Has it made me rich? No, look, I'm comfortable, but you're never going to get rich doing it. But if I feel rich inside, that's what's important.
Oh, absolutely. Well, it's been wonderful talking with you today, and I'm so glad we met a few weeks ago at the Parents Victoria conference, and were able to have a conversation, and it's led us to where we are today. And hopefully a few people will learn from this conversation and learn from your rich experiences. And it's been fantastic. Thanks for coming along and sharing your story.
Thanks for the opportunity, Rachel. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, what another inspiring interview in our Leadership in Education series of our Creating Connections podcast. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to learn more from other leaders in education, please click on the subscribe button to receive further podcasts on your feed. If you'd like to be a guest on our podcast, click on the link below to book a meeting with me to learn more about you and your leadership in education. Or if you're listening to this podcast, send an email to rachel@practicallylearning.com.au to express your interest in being on the podcast. If you're a school leader or teacher with aspirations for leadership, but you're challenged with self-doubt, overwhelm, and whether you have what it takes to take that next step, our Connect with Your Mind Mastery Coaching Program can support you to work on your own self-mastery to become the leader you aspire to be. For further information about our coaching and professional learning programs, please visit our website at practicallylearning.com.au or click on one of the links below and visit our podcast for our future series of interviews to support you as the adults who are guiding children on their learning journey. I do hope you enjoy the rest of our episodes on our Creating Connections podcast, and I hope to meet you soon.